Hi guys, today's YouTube video is all about intimacy. What is intimacy? Oftentimes this is a hot topic in the therapy room. The meaning of it, the definition, how both couples define it, how they practice or participate in it, or when intimacy is lost. And so today I thought I'd just do a really quick video on what is intimacy, the different kinds of intimacy, and most importantly, how you and your partner can work on building intimate connections in your relationship. So first of all, the actual definition in the dictionary of what is intimacy is a closeness, a familiarity, or a friendship. And then the other part is sexual intimacy. So that is actually in the definition. And when I talk to couples and intimacy is an issue in their relationship, one of the first things I do is I ask them to define in their relationship what is intimacy. And believe it or not, more often each couple or each person in the relationship has a different definition of how they define intimacy. And so right there, that is a great example of, when intimacy starts to wane or when there's quote unquote issues around intimacy, the first thing to do is to talk to your partner about the meaning of it or how you define it. So actually it's two things, how you define it and then what it means to you. So that's one thing. And Esther Perel is a sex therapist and a couples therapist. If you haven't heard of her yet, please check her out. One of the things that she talks about around intimacy, which I really, really like, is she breaks it down. There's a difference between intimacy, love, and sex. And in a relationship, it's really important, in my opinion, and she talks about it too, to define the three things and what they mean to you guys in your relationship and as a couple. So, that's one thing. In this video, I'm really just going to talk about the two different kinds of intimacy that typically show up in my office, and that's emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy. And so what I thought we'll first kind of talk about physical intimacy. It's not just about sex. It's about touch, it's connection, it's communication about physical intimacy in your relationship. It's about creating safe space to open up to one another and be physically intimate with each other. It is about sex. Touch, what are the different kinds? Massage, cuddling, and really in a relationship when couples come in and they're saying, there's an issue in our sex life, or they say physical intimacy, it's, again, I go back to what's the definition of physical intimacy? How do you guys talk about your sex life? How do you participate not only in, sexual activity or, how you talk about it, but also non-sexual affection or non-sexual touch. And if there's an issue when a couple maybe doesn't feel emotionally safe with one another, typically their intimate relationship, their physical intimate relationship starts to wane too. And so, when we look at, just again, some of the issues with physical intimacy, it's important, how do we first come to this table just to start talking about it with one another? Dr. Gottman, John Gottman, he has a free app called the Gottman Card Deck. I have talked about it in my other videos, but I absolutely love it. And actually in his card deck, there are a few different quote-unquote card decks that are amazing when it comes to getting a couple to really talk about their sex life or their sexual relationship. So I recommend downloading that, and there's questions about sex for men, questions about sex for women, and then he also has the salsa cards, and mild, medium, and hot, and so those are just good ways to talk about this particular issue if you're going to try talking about it when you're at home with one another. So that's kind of the umbrella of physical intimacy. And then the next one is emotional intimacy. And what is emotional intimacy? And to me, emotional intimacy is a sense of closeness, vulnerability, openness, sharing of feelings, a deep, intimate knowledge of one another. It's understanding your differences and how you're willing to work through those differences. It's a willingness to work things out. It's having that good, strong, solid foundation. And it's also, if you're in a crowded room of people and you two are on opposite ends of the room, you can look at one another and you just can get a sense of how that person might be feeling, or how that person is doing. And to me, that's that intimate knowledge of one another, or that deep personal knowledge of one another, and a good, solid foundation. It's your friendship. Remember, Dr. Gottman talks about one of the key components to making a relationship work is understanding, and also your friendship and how well you know one another. He calls it, do you know your partner's inner blueprint? How your partner sees the world. And that is really emotional closeness. And so, on a day-to-day, how do you check in to the emotional intimacy in your relationship? One of the things that he recommends is creating those rituals of connection, how you choose to nurture your relationship every day. How do you check in with one another? And, sometimes I ask couples, what makes your relationship different than, a relationship with your coworkers, your boss, and even your friends? And a lot of times it comes back to intimacy, how well you know one another. You're going to have conversations with one another that you don't have with other people. And typically, I call it, when couples are really struggling, sometimes I call it the missing piece. It's when there's this loss of emotional intimacy, the loss of connecting with one another, the loss of nurturing your, relationship and your friendship. Playfulness and humor is, gone. And so it's how you start to nurture those pieces again. Again, a good tool is that Gottman card deck that I was mentioning earlier. Not just the sex questions, but really the questions about, your love maps, how well you know one another, and just open-ended questions. When that missing piece, if there's that missing piece in your relationship, the emotional intimacy is waning, the thing that you need to do is really, you've got to start talking to one another. And no, you might not get those magical feelings all at once or right back just because you're starting to talk to one another again. It does take time. The other thing to do that I think is helpful, and Esther Perel talks about this in her Mating in Captivity book, but she talks about separateness, which, what do we do outside of the relationship and how we nurture ourselves and create a sense of aliveness that we bring back into our, marital or our primary relationship. And so, this sense of aliveness, she talks about love and desire being two different things, and we look to a partner, to have that spark that we got in the beginning. And really it takes, maybe we're not going to have that same spark that we did right at the beginning, the passion, but it takes work from both parties to continue to not only get to know one another, but to create that sense of aliveness in the relationship. And so if you think about what were the things that really attracted you to your partner in the beginning, it was, you wanted to ask questions to get to know them. And also there was this mystery about them. It's like, what are they doing when they're not with you? And you want to know about that. And it creates that sense of excitement and aliveness. And when you notice your partner doing things that really brings them to life, that's really attractive. And so making sure that you create not only togetherness in the relationship, but some separateness. What are you doing outside of the relationship to kind of really refuel and re-energize you and do the things that you love, and how you bring that back into the relationship? And I tell couples, how do you create this balance of independence and togetherness? And for each couple, it's different. So, make sure that you take time to really think about this notion of a relationship, and cultivating and creating intimacy isn't that we have to do everything together 24/7. It's not that at all. It's creating understanding and defining the difference between different kinds of intimacies in your relationship and how you're going to nurture those. and then also it's taking time to develop, you outside of the relationship. What are the things that you love to do? So I would, again, look at, the resources, the Gottman card deck. I would look into Esther Perel. You can just Google her and a whole bunch of stuff comes up. And then her book, Mating in Captivity, is another excellent book. So, that is it. Take time with your partner and decide or define what intimacy means to you and the different kinds of intimacies. Check out that Gottman card deck tool and Esther Perel. And also think about how do we come together and practice and participate in nurturing our relationship and celebrating intimacy and those intimate connections. All right, guys, that's it for today. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for weekly updates all about relationships. Have a great day.